Director of Renewable Energy Alliance, and I'll be leading proceedings for today's webinar. So welcome everybody. I'm delighted to see so many of you here. You're in for a deep exploration of some of the clever and collaborative work that's going on throughout regional Australia right now to deliver better housing outcomes at a time that they're most needed. I want to clock there's a huge amount of knowledge and expertise in the room, especially from the local government sector, but also the renewable energy industry and community organisations. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the various lands we're all joining from and thank them for their stewardship of Australia's lands and waterways over tens of thousands of years. Part of Realliance's
Can
mission
someone
is
look from
to
outside
work.
in the portal and see if there's a proposed development or a block, you know, where all that timber stood?
Part of Realliance's mission is to work alongside First Nations people to get the most out of the shift to clean energy. So I'm pleased we'll be profiling some excellent First Nations employment outcomes in one of our case studies today. For those of you on the call not familiar with us, RE Alliance is a small not-for-profit organisation, and our vision is a responsible and rapid shift to renewable energy in Australia that actively contributes to the strength and resilience of our regions. We take a practical approach in our work across three areas. So listening to and building capacity of regional communities to be the ones who lead the shift to clean energy, shifting the narrative away from misinformation and negativity to focus on solutions and opportunities. Hopefully you'll be seeing a fair bit of that today, and influencing government policies and improving industry practices to ensure that we're all working towards a fair and sustainable shift in regional communities. So for today's session, we'll kick off with a quick summary of the 6 housing case studies that we published towards the end of last year. Then we'll hear from people responsible for 4 of those case studies, and you'll get to hear a really wide variety of situations and approaches. Bart Sykes from Squadron will be talking to refurbishing unused buildings for workforce accommodation in Wellington in New South Wales. Jess Adler from Wimmera Southern Mallee Development will talk about a community-led approach to housing delivery in small communities in the Wimmera. Vincent Dwyer will talk about, from Energy Estate, we'll be talking about regional housing as a community asset in central Queensland. So importantly, the examples cross a range of different project stages. So the first example outlines an accommodation solution that's already up and running. So it'll be great to see one that's progressed to that point. But the other ones demonstrate the development of both community-led and developer-led strategies as well. At the end of the presentation, we'll be joined by Megan Kessler, RE Alliance's Policy and Research Director, who collated the report, and also Emily Sims from Uralla Shire Council and Owen Bushell from Tilt Renewables, who are involved in the report's other 2 case studies, will also be on the call. So their expertise will be available for your questions. So when we get to that point, we'll stop the recording and go to Q&A. So I'd request that if you're comfortable, please pop yourself on camera so that we can have as much of an open discussion as we can. And if you have questions as we go, you can put them in the chat or hold off until the Q&A and we'll get to as many as we can. I'd also like, just before we kick off, to acknowledge the work of Megan's predecessor in the role, Bridget Ryan, who helped initiate the project from our end, as well as Kate Rayner and Heidi McElney, who contributed to drafting up some of the case studies for the report. So, as the great response to today's event shows, housing in regional Australia is a hot button issue. The national housing crisis is just as real in rural and regional towns as it is in the cities, and it would be even if there weren't major infrastructure projects coming to a town near you. Of course, renewable energy projects are only some of the projects calling on local housing, with mines, rail and road projects also going ahead. So we really saw the importance of making sure that renewable energy projects were part of the solution and not part of the problem. What we've profiled here are 6 examples of projects that show what this can look like. But there's plenty more work to be done, and we're doing some of it right here today to make sure that these improvements to local housing stock become the norm for renewable energy projects. I'd encourage you to spread these case studies far and wide to make sure people know that they're the kind of things that are possible. And I might just note that as well as the report itself, the individual case studies also appear on our Renewables Done Right website. So they are very, very shareable with all of your friends, networks, and colleagues. But there are some consistent themes that turned up through the case studies. Starting early and engaging as early as possible with the local community on their view of your project's housing needs and their requirements. Partnerships are the central part you'll see in all of these case studies, particularly with local councils, because they help uncover what existing assets and opportunities there are to deliver the most cost-effective and socially integrated outcomes. You know, councils are the ones who really, they know what the strategy, the housing strategies are into the future. They know the areas that are earmarked for future accommodation. They know the lot numbers, and they know all the nitty gritty stuff that that people coming into the communities may not know. Engaging with the community, obviously, prioritizing the community engagement and input so that you understand what it is that communities are wanting to see into the future. Prioritizing legacy, planning to deliver a positive legacy by considering what the project will leave behind. And the other aspect of the local government involvement is that they can also be the main ones who are communicating with the community in that area. And they can develop legacy housing programs and strategies, but they need the resources to do it. So we do have any of our friends from the state and federal government here on the call, something for you to note there. And finally, the regulatory constraints are obviously key here. So understanding what those constraints are, being clear-eyed about what is and isn't possible, and communicating them clearly to all stakeholders are all vital. So in terms of the case studies we've covered, my apologies to participants from other states, but you'll see that the ones we've got here cover a big range of regional contexts. We've got some from Rocky in central Queensland, where there's a long history of work camps and FIFO mining workers, through to ag economy towns and regional cities in central New South Wales, through to small rural villages in Western Victoria. The people in each of these areas have very different needs, and the projects we're profiling here have all done outstanding work to connect with what their communities aspire to for the future of their towns. So that's a brief sort of intro to what the project itself is. So let's go straight on to the case studies at this point. And I'll introduce Bart Sykes, who's the Regional Economic Development Manager for Squadron Energy. So take it away, Bart.
Thanks, Andy. Well, to just very quickly start by acknowledging country. I'm on Gadigal country today in the Sydney CBD, but I'm a very proud bushy, lucky enough to live and work on Wiradjuri country out in Dubbo in the middle of the central west region of New South Wales. I suppose from the outset, my first comment on workforce accommodation is that I've lived and breathed it for a couple of years now, and I think it's an incredibly complex issue with a whole heap of impacting factors that I suppose have input into what a specific project needs and wants in terms of where their workforce is going to be accommodated. Andy and his team were keen on this Bellhaven example because it's been executed and it's linked to a project that's currently under construction. So I might get that next slide, Megan, if I can, please. So it's linked to this project of ours that called Youngler Wind Farm, which is just outside Wellington. We're at about 40 of those 69 turbine foundations that have been poured. Just for context, Wellington's got a population of about 4,000 people in the town, and along with Youngler, there's currently a solar project not far out of town, and also a battery project. My rough numbers are that there's probably about 800 workers across those three projects at the moment. Or in layman's terms, if you're walking down the street, 1 in every 5 people that you'd see in Wellington, if they're all accommodated there, would be from a renewable energy project. So it's a significant percentage of the population at the moment is engaged across those projects. Thanks, Megan. So that's the Bellhaven facility from a drone. I've just put some notes here that most of us who live in rural or regional New South Wales will tell you that there's current buildings in their towns and communities that could be used for workforce accommodation, often in some state of disrepair. So across our communities, I can think of things like old hotels, nurses' quarters. It's a big facility in Dubbo that's actually an old rail worker accommodation building, old hostels, or in this case, a nursing home. My grandmother actually lived in this facility in 2003 and 2004. Mum and Dad especially, but also my brothers and I made regular trips from Dubbo over to see her while she was alive and residing in Wellington. So it's funny how things work, but it's good to be involved in this project a bit more than 20 years later in sort of giving it another life as worker accommodation. Pretty strong relationship with Dubbo Regional Council. Wellington falls in the Dubbo LGA, and in our very early days of developing the Youngler project, they made us aware that this facility was around and not being used. And we took a leap of faith and both committed to it via an LTESA, but also leased it prior to the project starting. Next one, please, Megan. So how do we do it, or what did we do? So there's many businesses who, if not for a project like Bellhaven, wouldn't have been directly benefited from the construction at Youngler. And I mean directly benefit in terms of being engaged direct by either us or a contractor, but this enabled us to spread that love a little bit further. Justin turned me wide, a colleague of mine, and I did some work to see what First Nations capacity was there around, reference that back to our refurb scope, and then made a commitment that we'd undertake a 100% First Nations and local procurement approach to the refurb. We were lucky enough to find a lead contractor with similar values to us, who had the expertise and the size and breadth in terms of cash flow and other things to be able to handle this refurb. The guy on the right of that photo was the foreman for the project, who works for the company I'm talking about, which was a First Nations building company out of Dubbo called Tycon. The other thing that I've just said here was that our EPC or even balance of plant contractors, depending on how projects are procuring, may not be particularly interested in A, refurbing old infrastructure in communities, or B, procuring someone to run and operate that for the life of the project. So we did that. We did that with the view of we really wanted to leave some legacy behind in community. We really wanted to ease some of the burden on the rental market in town. So we did that work in terms of funding and overseeing the refurb, procuring someone to run the facility, and then we've offered that through to our contractors just at cost recovery. Thanks, Megan. The next question that was asked was what some of the challenges were. And I've just put a couple of things down, both challenges and I suppose the benefits and bonuses. But the first obvious one is the economics of it. So the price point can be a challenge. Single share, ensuite, catered, rooms cleaned, accommodation is not always for everyone or all contractors. And and especially nearing larger regional centres like Wellington and Dwyer. So what I mean by that is that some of the businesses on our sites and others will strongly preference Alaha and long-term rental accommodation options, which has its pros and cons as well. And obviously that there's some difference in price point depending on how people are going to accommodate their workforce. The other challenge we had with this Bellhaven facility is that it's a really big facility with a lot of square metres under a roof. So anything in terms of the refurb turned into quite big jobs. But structurally it was sound, and it is what it is. I mean, as I said, there's a lot of these facilities around in our communities that are getting close to the point of being uneconomical to refurb or repair. This one particularly was unused since 2018, so there's a few cobwebs around. The biggest bonus that we've seen, like I said, unoccupied since 2018, 2019. It's eased the pressure on the local market, but there's also a lot of excitement from locals around what the future of the project will be past construction of Youngler. Next one, please, Megan. So the impact and what we're expecting, I mentioned future use, but in terms of an increase in tourism stock, many of you know Wellington and Dwyer, but there's strong potential of other projects coming on with close proximity, to town. So there'd be option for those projects to use the facility. And the other one that I thought about is the REACT Training Centre that the Dwyer Regional Council are planning to build some accommodation for that, or it's a big jail nearby. There's always a need for housing for DV and for other reasons. So I don't think it'll go unused into the future, and there's some legacy there for community. It de-risked our projects. It ensured an easy transition for one of our TSI contractors to mobilise in the site. And importantly as well, that it's keeping people in the town who are opening their wallets and spreading the benefit of the renewable energy transition. So there's a little bit about Bellhaven.
Thanks, Bart. It's Megan here. I think we might have lost Andy temporarily, so I will jump in. And yeah, just say thank you so much for that. It was really great to hear how you work through that, and to be thinking about the legacy as you go as well. It's really exciting. Next, we've got Jess from Wimmera, and Jess is just back from leave. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jess. Are you there and able to kick off?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Megan. And thanks, Bart, for a great presentation. It's a project that I think everybody is excited to hear about, and a lot of applications to a lot of different communities. So I'm going to speak to you about a different type of project and how we have attempted to pull community together to take a little bit more control over housing in what is what failing markets that we're all experiencing, common themes throughout regional Australia. So I come to you today from the Wimmera Southern Mallee region. So we are the traditional owner groups Wodjabullock, Jard, Wajaj, Wajali, Wagaya, Jabagulk peoples, and pay our respects to their cultures and elders past, present and emerging. Next slide, please. So I work for Wimmera Southern Mallee Development with Chris Sauner, so a few of you may have met in your adventures. I won't go through exactly what we do, but what I want to do is to highlight that one of our key strategic pillars is to remove barriers to growth and livability in the regions, and we've got specific targets around building homes. So that's why we do what we're doing. Next slide, please. A little bit about our region, and again, this is quite contemporary to a number of different regions, but quite a large geographical area, 54,000 people, $7.4 billion GDP, heavily dependent on agriculture. We don't have a lot of irrigation in the region. Our farms range from In the south, more lifestyle farms. In the north, quite large farms, but they tend to be family owned. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so everybody in this room, I'm sure, understands the issue that housing presents to regional growth and livability. So in 2020, we decided to commission a study to look at the issue. So it's called the Housing Blueprint Report. It's available on the Wimmera Southern Mallee Development webpage, and I encourage you to take a look if you are interested in the issue. But what the report found is that the extent of the agreement that the housing is inhibiting livability and economic strength of towns in the Wimmera Southern Mallee is just overpowering. So we surveyed a lot of different stakeholders, and it was found that it's the #1 challenge inhibiting growth, livability and economic strength in the region, which is what we're all about. There are a number of other findings in there. COVID-19 pressures with exodus from metropolitan centres, which again is an issue across a lot of Victoria, certainly. We also acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of growth coming to our region. So we've got a number of agricultural value-adding projects coming to the region. We have a number of mineral sands mines looking to enter into the region and potentially be up and running in the next couple of years, and obviously renewable energy and transmission projects as well. We found that housing choice and availability was a significant contributor to the livability equation for new regional migrants, and we are particularly dependent on skilled and unskilled migrants in our region. And that the rental housing market had essentially failed in small towns. So this was proving to be a problem for local businesses who are trying to attract key staff. Next slide, please. All right, so I won't go into too much detail here, but I just want to talk about some of the recommendations, probably one of the recommendations, which was around the development of a for-profit housing model, which would allow local investors to tip funds in and for communities to build in their regions. So a model that's attractive to investors and relevant and controlled by local communities. Next slide, please. Okay, so from this recommendation, Wimmera Housing Innovations was born. So it's a for-profit housing model, and it's designed to be a collaborative and community-driven housing pathway. It's governed locally, decisions are made locally, and finance is often obtained locally with potential for industry to tip in equity as well. But the core purpose of these SPVs is community. So the way the model works is that each town establishes its own company. So it's called a special purpose vehicle company, and its sole purpose is to develop these housing projects. They are supported by Wimmera Housing Innovations in respects to legal and feasibility support, governance, procurement, all those fun pieces that need to happen, which local communities don't always have the capacity or the willingness to undertake. So council support is really important, and we've been incredibly lucky, particularly at Yarriambiack Shire Council, for the support that's been provided to these projects in our region. And the model welcomes participation from local partners, including community investors, employers, industry participants, anyone that's interested and has the resources available, however they may be, to contribute to these projects. But the key to this is that the participation is always on the community's terms. So everything is controlled by community, and the solutions are designed for community. Next slide, please. All right, so again, this is a partnership model. Partnership and collaboration is at the key of what we do. So Wimmera Housing Innovations' role in the collaboration is to provide the expertise that we were talking about earlier, feasibility work to make sure that the projects are actually viable, legal support through an organisation a firm called Colin Biggers and Paisley, who have been very supportive and very generous with their time, I will say. And that guides investors to make sure the legal framework and the establishment of these companies is done appropriately. We also provide some support around procurement, governance, and delivery to the special purpose companies. And we work with the progress societies or equivalent organisations in different communities, and they lead the local decision making. So they select the sites and they ultimately control the housing asset development. Councils have a role in planning, land assembly and service connections, and where equity comes from, it's always about money at the end of the day, isn't it? Employers and community investors purchase shares in these companies, and that's what funds the developments of the properties. And there is scope for energy and transmission companies to contribute to those projects as well, subject to community appetite. Next slide, please. So why does this matter? Because we believe that communities want really long-term, locally appropriate solutions to their housing issues, not just short-term worker camps. So they obviously have a role and they always will, but if there's an alternative available, leaving that long-term legacy item behind in communities, it's really important. And it helps influence people's perspective to the projects as well. Each community has its own needs and aspirations, so you can't take a blanket approach to different communities. And there's a saying that I've heard said a few times that I really love: if you know one small town, you just know one small town. And 30 kilometres away, a completely different community with different issues, different people, different perspectives, totally different scenarios. So we know that housing shortages are limiting livability, workforce attraction and regional growth. There's an opportunity to turn this temporary workforce demand into that permanent community asset, as we discussed earlier, and create genuine legacy for the regions. And our guiding principle is that the community solves community problems using a partnership model. Next slide, please. All right, so the impact and what's next. We have established 4 special purpose vehicle companies across 4 communities. We've secured sites. We have 13 homes being built. So we're a little bit behind Bart and his project in terms of where they're at, but we've got shovels hitting ground very shortly, which is very exciting. And they'll be complete. Some of them will start to be completed in this year. But what's really worked well is that the model for the SPVs is replicable across other small towns. So we know what it takes to establish these companies. We know what sort of feasibility works look like, and we have almost like a template model that can be replicated across other small towns. Next slide, please. So key benefits and learnings this is a Chris comment, and it's a very Chris comment, but I do love it. Everybody from residents to regional businesses can play a part in these solutions, but no one partner defines the story. And this comes back to that collaborative model and approach that we take that we think really, really works. So this creates housing that stays in community hands. It's owned by the investors, the equity contributors, and that's a long-term tangible community benefit. We're creating a culture of collaboration. We're replacing short-term industry fixes with long-term community-focused assets. We found that finance and governance frameworks are really, really critical, and that's one of the biggest gaps, and that's one of the most important roles that WIP plays in supporting these communities. I'll go next slide, please. And this is the last slide, I think, and this is from the other side of the equation. So I've tipped money into one of these projects as an equity holder, and I wanted to talk about what gave me the confidence to proceed with writing a check, so to speak. We don't write checks anymore, but and gave me the confidence to invest. It was the strength of the financial modelling, which was included in the memorandum of information, which is like a prospectus but isn't. It was very, very transparent and very clear about outcomes and expected returns. And it was very honest about the fact that investment, it says here, may be lower than alternative investment opportunities, but it is lower, and that's fine. But that takes me to the next point. Investor motivations do differ, but most people who are tipping money into these projects are driven by altruistic community commitment, and they want to see things happen in their community. And the final point is that agricultural businesses, so a lot of this money is coming from farmers in our region, they're really familiar with co-op and shared ownership investments. So we often buy machineries with our neighbours, we set up grain cleaning businesses, we do all sorts of things. And it's a model that really resonates. And so it's been quite successful from that perspective. And I think that is my last slide. Yay! Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jess. That's fantastic. So for our last presentation, I'd like to go to Vincent Dwyer, who's the co-founder and CEO at Energy Estate. Vincent.
Thanks, Andrew. First, I too am on Gadigal country, but in reference to some of the projects we're talking about, it's very much on Darrinbal country around Rockhampton and in our New Zealand project on relevant Maori land in different parts of New Zealand. So I give my respects to elders in each of those communities. I want to, and I sort of, really building on a lot of commentary that Bart and Jess have made, and certainly a lot of the philosophy of the development of these opportunities are very much aligned with the thesis that Jess was outlining. What we have, in a very practical sense, wrestled with is how do we do this at scale? When we're talking, say, 400 workers on one site, and you've got multiple sites that may be running in a region. So you're talking either a sequence of 300 or 400 workers on 2 or 3 or 4 projects over the space of 7 or 8 or 9 years. And then some of those workers will be on for short periods of time, some will be there for long periods of time. So there's there's an interesting step in complexity to try to step it up from 10 or 20 to 50 to 200, 300, 400 workers. And that's the hard bit. How much of it is permanent, how much of it is disposable, which is the thing none of us want. And understanding then the financial relativities on all of this, where a traditional large-scale worker camp, to use the old school language, is a $30 to $40 million project, if you include mobilisation and demobilisation, versus doing an equivalent number of rooms that might be more like 100 million to 120 million if you're going to do it at high quality. So I guess there's what we have been focused is on the larger scale issues, which, to be frank, are not easy. None of it's easy for anyone. And as Jess was saying, return expectations, if you can mobilise local capital on altruistic return expectations, that's fantastic. That's great leaning into. When you're getting into the multiple sets of $100 million projects, altruistic capital tends to run out and you tend to get pretty blunt financial return expected capital. And so it's trying to design a product that leans into all of the things that both Bart and Jess were saying from a philosophical community partnership perspective, long-term legacy, but also trying to structure something that can meet the non-altruistic capital to enable sufficient funds to be deployed to leave large-scale legacy opportunities. So that's the dilemma that we've sort of been wrestling with, and I'm not pretending we have magical answers, but I'll run through two different sort of elements to the strategy. The first one is what we've been looking at in central Queensland, because we've been developing projects up there. And the second is more about how you deliver, what product is it that you want to deliver, as opposed to the way you're delivering it. So I might move on to the sort of first case study and talk about what the sort of approach to these projects from a central Queensland perspective. The starting point, and I guess I'll try not to repeat a lot of the commentary that Jess and Bart have already made, and I don't mean to take it for granted, but it's sort of inbuilt into the philosophy of what we're doing. And so rather than repeat it, given the time constraints, I sort of take it positively as read. But the first thing is, okay, how do we integrate the projects coming through on the one hand, and the need to align that with the projects? So how many rooms do you need? How long do you need them for? Are there 2, 3, 4 projects in a row, or is it a one-off project? How far is that project from town, the nearest town? Can it be part of town? Is it not part of town? The second is to very much engage into the councils and the community to say, okay, what do you want? And as Jess said, if you know one town, you know one town. And different councils and communities have very different views and experiences on all of this. Some positive, some not so positive. So then it's a matter of trying to, what is the social and affordable housing strategy of the feds, the state, the council, and then within council areas, which bits of council areas are of more relevance and importance to council than other areas? Where do they want to grow a part of an existing town to complement the existing infrastructure of that town? So that's sort of one level of sort of alignment, which is, and councils have been very engaged in this, which is fantastic. All of us collectively wrestling with the financial, and I'll come on to the financial. The other is things that have been mentioned, embedding it early, and again, that's incredibly important, because it takes, if you're going to deliver a longer term solution, this infrastructure often has to be built before the main project is built. And if it has to be built before the main project is built, and it takes 6 months to get a DA to build this before the main project, you're sort of looking years in advance. And that's a practical challenge for projects where they're one-off projects, because no one wants to put the down payments on these assets before they know the main project is going ahead. So it needs the developers to come together as an industry and sit with council and discuss, and council knows everything that's going on generally in the region, and they see all these projects, and they're not all going to get up. So it's trying to work out how the industry can come together. Better by design is, and we'll come on to that in my case study too, but looking at the housing as a key community benefit. How that community benefit is manifest sort of depends on the community. So Bart's repurposing is one style of community benefit. The other is, social affordable housing. That's a very locally influenced community benefit. What does the region need? What does the council think the region need? What does the community? What are the neighbours, and so on? And the last is to try and align, as you're developing projects, community benefit is very important. Community benefit agreements in Queensland, voluntary planning agreements, various things have different names in different parts of the country. But what is the benefit coming to community? Is it cash that goes to council? Or is it in-kind benefits that goes to the community? How do you divide that up? And then, importantly, how do you integrate a First Nations solution into that as well? And how can housing solutions be an accelerator of the community benefit? There's an alignment between housing solutions and community benefits. So, for example, we'll have an Indigenous land use agreement and a broader partnership agreement with the Darumbal people around Rocky. And not only are there the traditional elements of community benefit that people will be aware of, but how can I have my construction contractor required to provide the community benefits through the housing solution? And that's where Bart was talking about traditional either construction contracts or services contracts or employment or whatever it might be. And that's, again, very relevant to the skills of the local traditional owner community, as well as what council wants to achieve. So really the Queensland project is, I've got, in that case, potentially 3 or 4 projects in that region. We're doing some. There's general road infrastructure upgrades for the Bruce Highway as well. So this is an infrastructure solution to the opportunity, and it's trying to bring that whole of infrastructure solution into our community benefits. So Central Queensland is the sorts of things you would expect, the things that have been discussed with by prior speakers on this. How do we bring benefits to the local community, the local workforce, local employment and skills? Can we, for example, get enough, if we're going to do 200 to 300 rooms, is that enough to get other service providers to themselves construct service provision activities or factories or assembly plants within the region? Then, in addition to all of that, there's what is the product? And I'll come to the product in a sec, but do we design the product for its own outcome? So how do you design a village? What are the environmental, biodiversity, sustainability elements of a village? So it's not just the worker and community, it's also how is it itself designed. So the idea in Queensland was, council were terrific. They said, we want to grow this town. Here's a large block of land on the edge of this town. We want you to integrate it into the sewage system and the wastewater system, the electricity system, the roads and so on. So it's about supporting councils who then go, I've got to upgrade my wastewater system. And so how does this integrate to that to help contribute to that upgrade of the wastewater system, not just sort of dump it on council?
Sorry, Vincent, I might just sort of scurry you along a little bit, just make sure.
Okay. Then my case study 2 is very simply then.
Thanks,
Thank you, Andrew. Case study 2 was really a focus on the product, and this is where we've partnered in New Zealand with RTA Studio. If you move on to the next slide, about the product. How do we ensure we have the right sort of product? Is it a long term? Is it high quality modular that's repurposed? 5 to 7 years worker accommodation, 7 to 30 years social affordable housing. And that's about design. So I'll leave it there for the moment. I'm very happy to take questions on things like bankability and the financial side of things.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vincent. That was great. 3 really different contrasting ways to approach this problem, and so good to sort of zoom out to the financeability aspects of it in that regard. So just before we go to Q&A, I hope you won't mind, but I just want to give a quick plug to our Regional Leaders Network, which is a group of leaders who gather monthly for facilitated discussion and information sharing on topics that are central to regional communities. So it was, in fact, the network and these meetings that we were having with leaders in these regions that kept on bubbling up the need to talk about and elevate this issue of regional housing. So that's led to the case studies and today's webinar. So if you're interested in being a part of that network, and as you can see, it's got members across a range of different kind of areas. There's a page on our website you can go to, and we're also holding an in-person summit in Toowoomba in September. So definitely get amongst that. Rightio. So we'll go straight to Q&A now. Kate, if you can please stop the recording so that people can, speak their minds.